So let's look at the DDL. Now there's going to be a lot of acronyms here because I'm going to talk about the DQL and the DML and the DDL. SQL is an example of a data query language, and obviously the acronym for that is a DQL. And with SQL, what we can do is we can actually query the database and get responses back. And as we've seen, in many cases, that's as if you're writing a what if query, and we just see a response back. We're not actually changing any values in the table or changing the structure or the nature of the table. Well, the thing about SQL is that SQL obviously is a DQL, but the thing about SQL is that not only is it a DQL, but it's also a DDL and a DML. So parts of the SQL language actually enable you to describe tables and describe the kinds of data that will go in those tables. And that syntax, that part of the SQL language, is called the data definition language, the DDL. There's a third part then, which is the DML, and the DML is the data manipulation language. And what that means is we can actually do what we haven't done before. We can change the data in the actual tables. So we can change data, insert data, and delete data, things like that. So SQL is, if you like, an example of a DDL and a DQL and a DML. It does all three things. We don't need to learn a different language for each of these different parts of things, ways that we want to interact with the database. SQL does all three, which is excellent. So let's look at the DDL part. So DDL is all about, if you like, creating a table, modifying a table, or deleting a table structure. And here's the syntax that we use in SQL to create a table. We go create table, and then what we do after that is we have a table name. And if you remember, the whole point about table names is they have to be unique, they have to be distinct. You can't have two tables with the same name. So that will create a table with that name. And then after create table name, what we do is inside brackets, we have a long list of the things that will go to make up the different columns, the different attributes that will be saved, that will enable us to save data inside that table. And they're laid out like this. You basically go the name of the column, again those have to be unique for this table, and then you specify the type, and depending upon the actual version of the database you're using and the SQL standard that it's supporting, you can supply all sorts of other parameters there to do with, is it null, not null, is it a key, things like that. Let's focus on the actual types that are available. They basically tend to fall into these kind of categories. Some sort of string fact field where you've got some sort of size. There could be support for dates. There could be support for big character fields. There could be numbers and all sorts of different numbers. And then there's other fields as well. You get things like binary files, images, video, supports for a wide variety of different data types. Let's have a quick look at an example of some of these. So here we go. Here's an example where I'm going to create a sort of a version of an employee table called myemp, and you can see it's got three fields inside. It's got ename, sal, and department number. Ename is going to be able to store characters inside it. Sal is going to be a number, and department number is also going to be a number. And you can see the layout there. So I'm creating a table called myemp with three columns inside it. It looks like this. Now here I'm using Access, and so that's a screenshot from an Access database. Syntax is very similar in other languages as well, in other database products as well. So for example, in MySQL, something like that. What does vary is the types that are offered by the database product. So you would actually have to go in and you'd sort of have a search on what types are supported by the different databases, because there is a bit of variability there depending upon the product. They will tend to fall into those categories though of text, numbers, dates, other types of things. So for example, here are the data types that are supported by Access: text, numbers, currency, yes, no fields, dates, etc. Here are the different types supported by MySQL. Now these are closer to the ANSI SQL standard data types that are available, and you'll find that these are very common to many database products. Well, another part of the data definition language then is not actually creating a table, but it's actually removing a table. Now, in the database world, what we say when we want to sort of remove a table, we say we are dropping the table, deleting a table. Now, we have to be quite careful here. So just watch out for that language. We say drop a table, and the syntax for dropping a table is simply this. We simply go drop table, table name. And so in this instance, for example, if we wanted to delete, if we wanted to completely remove myemp, the table, and all of its contents, we would go drop table myemp, and the table would disappear. Now you do need to be careful, because in some sort of products, this is an irreversible process. If you drop the table and you haven't got it saved properly and a backup saved somewhere, you could actually completely lose the entire table and not get it back in any way, shape or form. So just be really careful when you're using drop table.